When we first encountered the human species, we had conducted ourselves as a conquering empire, glassing a colony we had thought to be a primitive homeworld, and beginning the process of strip mining, and in doing so, kicking off the human-vol'kir war. We were then introduced to a pair of very human concepts, adapted to an interstellar scale: guerrilla warfare and island hopping. The humans took the idea of guerrilla warfare and adapted it to small-scale fleet combat, ambushing our trade convoys near jump points in the heliopause of star systems, isolating and depriving multiple targets of much-needed supplies, while repurposing the supplies aboard for themselves, and using the computational and navigational data to select future targets for their island-hopping campaign, while forcing us to spread ourselves thin across multiple star systems, searching the impossible vastness of outer solar systems. Eventually, humanity wore us down. We became financially drained, tired. Their attacks sapped our maintenance and manufacturing infrastructure for seemingly small but incredibly critical and often overlooked advanced components, and slowly sidelined major fleet combatants as parts to repair absolutely critical systems, such as jump and navigation, became in even shorter supply. Eventually, with enough of our technology and manufacturing captured or reverse engineered, a majority of our space-going fleet sidelined or relegated to in-systems duties, and an inability to concentrate our spaceborne infantry as a result, they conducted a rapid strike against our seat of power. It was relatively bloodless, a token gesture meant to send a message more than anything, but a foreign fleet controlling close orbit, smashing your orbital infrastructure and sending a massed kinetic strike into the ocean 10 miles off the coast of your capital tends to send a message. So embarrassed, bankrupt, and teetering on the brink of collapse after fighting a century-long war on a far less advanced species' terms, we capitulated. Most will take this at face value. Through determination and gumption, the humans won. Yes, true. Their infantry and sailors have an unmatched fighting spirit, and what they call esprit de corps the galaxy over. But that's not why they won. See, the humans have a very particular specialty that is equally unmatched and far more important. They live and breathe logistics. They looked at the data they capture from our convoys, and in the most convoluted manner I have ever seen, they put together hundreds of innocuous data points into a picture that should have been classified. They understood our logistics better than we did. One of their first strikes was a facility which I helped try to defend, and never thought much about at the time. A ground-based low-power jump array, simply for testing the stability of components in jump conditions. I had assumed it was simply an outgrowth of some overfunded public safety office. The humans, however, being relatively new to jump travel, and encountering pitfalls we ourselves had solved and promptly forgotten, immediately recognized it as critical to the quality control process for advanced components to ensure that artificial matter, or worse, antimatter, is capable of remaining stable in jump conditions, hence its position on an otherwise near-barren world. By capturing a single world on the outer rim of our empire, the humans cut our ability to create jump-safe components in half. However, they're not just excellent at deciphering the logistics of others, and, if you'll permit me an anecdote, I'll explain. About 20 years after the conclusion of the Proxima War, as the humans call it, we had made mutual peace, and humanity approached us with a defense pact as a method of protecting their investment in our reconstruction. They kept some of our worlds, and on others we founded joint human-vol'kir pilot colonies. We also formed a small combined military force from select units, in both of our standing militaries, which is the relevant part. It did not take long for some of the more belligerent species, which had been previously cowed by the Vol'kir Empire's might, to test this alliance, as stellar politics does abhor a power vacuum. Inside of 5 years, 3 separate species attempted to carve out bits of Vol'kir space as their own. One attempted to incur in human space, and nobody knows what the human response was, but the conflict lasted less than 24 hours, as measured on the human homeworld, and neither side will speak on the matter. To the point, however, one of these incursions into Vol'kir space was directly on the Vol'kir side of the border to human space, against one of the human-vol'kir pilot colonies I mentioned. It does have a Vol'kir name with a right and proper glottal stop, but the human name is what everyone uses: Nukta. Joint Command was activated and Nukta defended. However, the human side of JCOM had an idea: a counteroffensive, to show that attacks will have consequences. Or, to use a human term I am particularly fond of, fuck around and find out. The Vol'kir side of JCOM was hesitant. We were still in the process of building our fleet back up to something that could be used for more than interior defense and patrol, and weren't sure that the Vol'kir could manage to put together an expeditionary force. The humans replied, stating in clear terms that they would handle that aspect, and would otherwise commit 2/3 of any infantry force and as many fleet assets as the force structure demanded. Assuming that the humans had some kind of upper limit on this, the Vol'kir Defense Command put together a list of units, totaling about 30,000 infantry, with the requisite supporting units, expecting that the humans would pick through and select a few of those units to accompany their own expeditionary force. Much to their surprise, the humans effectively looked at that list, nodded, and said, "That'll do." In retrospect, that should have been something of a clue. Thus, I embarked on 1.5 Terran years of joint exercises, cross-training and pre-deployment workups alongside human units. At some point along the way, the humans decided that our plasma-casting weaponry was wholly inadequate, and quite possibly offensive to their sensibilities. They seemed to firmly believe, to a man, that pulling a trigger ought to result in loud noise, and every unit was re-equipped at the battalion level with human battle rifles, machine guns, and anti-armor weapons. This later turned into an ongoing procurement contract for the entire Vol'kir military, which, again in retrospect, should have been another clue about humanity's logistical prowess. 18 Terran months later, we were on our way. It was at our first engagement that it really finally hit home exactly how serious the humans were about logistics. We had selected the world of Knikt as our first target. The humans wanted to push back against the Vidine, as they were the most militarily powerful of the powers poking at the new alliance, but also not so delusional that they couldn't see what was happening when we began striking in their territory. They had then deferred to the Vol'kir intelligence unit aboard to decide which planet to strike. Knikt was ultimately selected because it had a large spaceport, which was both attractive as a beachhead for the planetary assault, and also as a piece of infrastructure that made the planet valuable to keep when terms were delivered to the Vidine. The Vol'kir contingent was selected as first to land, largely because our longer lifespans meant that many of us had seen combat during the Proxima War, and that made us a valuable veteran component of the combined force, the human part of which was largely untested, save for the rare Lost Boys, who had been part of humanity's initial counterattacks during the war, and made it through, in part, due to time dilation, before humanity reverse-engineered our FTL. When my unit received our operational orders, and any last-minute fragos, we had been assigned to Wave 1, LZ Olympus, with a tasking to take the spaceport control buildings. We would be preceded by UNCA Marine Moose teams, dropping from orbit to secure the LZ, after which UNCA heavy lifter spaceplanes would drop us, and to my surprise, armor and air mobile transport to the LZ. Had the humans somehow brought IFVs and non-space capable aircraft? Yes, they absolutely had. So we reported to our assigned dropship, a heavy spaceplane with a combination of air breathing and closed cycle engines, which I came to know as a Stork, but was officially called something dull like Transport Airspace Infantry CEX-24A, or something of the sort. We found that the humans had swapped the normal backward-facing human jump seating that we had experienced during our cross-training with harnesses, with Vol'kir pattern buckles that were a far better fit to our centaur-like, as the humans called it, frames. Again, they had seen the issue, prototyped, tested, and produced a solution in under 2 years. I, of course, took it for granted at the time. Then we dropped. It was a rough ride down, and by the time we reached the ground, the Moose teams had cleared us a perimeter, set up man-pass positions, and UNCA Falcon and Flanker spaceplanes had secured local air and space superiority. The firefight at the control complex was tense but short, with the Verdeen surrendering after about 2 hours. A UNCA Navy combat control team then took up residence, and the flood began. Lifter after lifter after lifter made the trip down and back up again. A human Sec 4 battalion was first, and expanded our zone of control to just outside the spaceport, into parts of the surrounding city. Then came, of all things, construction vehicles and forklifts. Then the Connex boxes. Thousands of Connexes over weeks. They slowed down after the first few days, as more infantry needed to get to ground as our zone of control expanded, but they did keep coming. Some had timber, others had powdered concrete, others still had rebar or electrical wire by the ton. Some of the Connexes were prefab habitation units, or rec rooms. But the ones that truly made me understand human logistics came on the first day. Not less than 24 hours after landfall, I saw some of the human infantrymen, eyeing one particularly heavy lifter spaceplane, as it came down for final approach. I plodded over and sat on my haunches near them, intrigued but confused. Was this some new weapon they were excited to try? Some of their special operation powered armor? Curious, I asked the nearest human what the fuss was. His reply, "It's the king, man." Naturally, as you may know, humans are not led by a king. Well, some might be. They're still not truly united internally. But, as far as I was aware, a king was a purely political role with no place in a war zone, and certainly wouldn't suffer being brought down in a shipping container of all things. I looked at him confused, and he just chuckled, and gestured for me to watch, and I did. A few minutes later, the squeal of tires and tarmac announced the spaceplane had landed, and the watching humans cheered, and a few other Vol'kir who, like myself, watched on with a mix of curiosity and amusement, shrugged at one another. That is, until the ramp lowered. Out rolled 4 Connexes on wheels with attached generators. These were not normal tan Connexes. They had been painted a mix of colours beyond bizarre to see in a war zone. One was yellow and red, with a large human M. Another was purple and white with a bell. A third was green and yellow, with what looked like an odd version of a recycling symbol, and a reference to human intracity public transport. And the fourth I will never forget. It was blue, red, yellow and brown, with a food item, and a portrayal of a human in royal garb. And on the side, the words Burger King in enormous red letters. At the beginning of an invasion, humanity had shipped 4 separate fast food enterprises across interstellar distances at great cost, and had them in operation under 24 hours after first landing. I had a burger later that day. It was okay. Hail to the king, baby.